Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are above replacement radio. And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today on this Sunday that we're recording on. Normally record on Saturday, but I had a bit of some things in my schedule this week. There's football on today, but of course we're talking baseball as always. I got a haircut this weekend, which was huge. There's nothing better than like that haircut feeling when you needed it so bad. I needed this one for like 2 weeks, and
yeah, I'm getting there myself, and I totally understand that feeling, because it's like, yeah, it's usually like a week, maybe it could get to like a 3-week period where it's like, this is a mess. This really needs to start cleaning up, and when it finally hits, it's like, whew, don't have to worry about this for another month or
months plus. Yeah, I don't know how you are, Chris, with this, but like I live 2 hours from my home, and I've been going to the same barber since high school. Like I try my hardest to never go anywhere else. I don't know if you probably don't have that same luxury because you're much farther away from your home than I am. I don't know if you ever had a barber at home that you kind of had as your staple, but like genuinely, I think since high school, I've only gotten my hair cut somewhere else like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, no, I'm in a similar boat. Even, I moved to Virginia in October 2023. I still didn't get my haircut in Virginia until May of 2024.
Wow.
Because I went back to East Haddam, Connecticut, and got my haircut from my barber in, Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, and then I think March of 2024, and then eventually
Christmas to March, tough.
Yeah, it got a little bit long, got a little bit messy, but yeah, no, I usually try to stick with the East Haddam barber, but yeah, but yeah, no, I do understand that sentiment, because yeah, while I was in college, it was the same thing too. I always went back home for the haircut. So yeah, it's a big thing, and I'm glad we're kind of on the same boat there.
There were literal times when I was in college when I would drive an hour 45 home just to get a haircut and then come straight back on weekends. That was a thing that I did on multiple occasions. I've done it here too. I remember when I lived in Cape Cod, I was there for 2 months. I couldn't get a haircut before I left because there was just not a lot. I was on a road trip right before leaving for the Cape. I just unfortunately didn't work out. So I had to get a haircut out there, and I needed a new one like 2 weeks later. They didn't do it right because I'm just awful at explaining how my actual barber does it, because it's like, I don't know, they just come in and do the same thing they've done for 6, 7 years. And when it got to the end of the season, my hair was probably the longest it's been, like in, let's just say, the decade of the 2020s. Like even it was longer than it got to any point of the pandemic. It was so bad. And I left a day early specifically so I could get a haircut. It was that bad.
Yeah, no, it's like yeah, it's like having, if you were to own a home and just had some bushes that were just going crazy, and it's just like, okay, we need to put some organization to this. So
Yeah.
I'm happy we were able to do that this past weekend. With in the
Especially since like I gotta be on TV and stuff. Like,
well, that is actually a thing that you have to worry about, that I don't necessarily have to worry about. Yeah, this is all my FaceTime in terms of the public eye.
I gotta go out into the community, get recognized by people every now and then.
Yeah, right. At a Wegmans and whatnot.
Yep, I was actually just there.
Yeah,
didn't get recognized today, which I'm fine with.
Yeah, that's very, very very understandable. But yeah, in the baseball world, it was a little bit mild, which is maybe why we started our show talking about haircuts. We only have really 2 big signings, or 2 mid-market signings this past week to talk about. And of course the Dodgers participated in one of them. And yeah, this actually happened kind of right after
Sunday.
right after we recorded last week. So the episode um or last week's episode still hadn't come out yet. But yeah, we got to talk about Tanner Scott going to the Dodgers on a 4-year, $72 million deal. What did you think about this?
It was I mean, I was in the Target parking lot and the passive notification came through while I was sitting in my car just after leaving the store. And I started like maniacally laughing, thinking there's like, there's no way, man. There's no way. Uh, 4 years, 72 million, like you mentioned. I do remember looking at the roster resource a couple of nights prior and being like, interesting, this great team, Kopech and Evan Phillips, closer by committee. Like, do we feel confident in that? Is Kopech gonna be this breakout guy now that he's out of Chicago? Well, we're not even gonna get the answer to that question because the Dodgers just decided, hey, we could just go get the best closer on the market and also the second best closer with Kirby Yates because they got him as well, right? So it was I mean, like, obviously it sparked a lot of discourse, like we've talked about for the last like two shows now. Um, I will remain on my take that there is not a salary cap necessary in this league. Every again, 4 years, 72, like another team could have done that. Phillies could have done it. Any team that needs a closer could have done it. It would have worked. The Dodgers are the ones that decided to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I think uh it was kind of exemplified that he was out there, he was available, and a point you've brought up before, talking about like the Dodgers and being um and always getting the top free agents is not yes, most teams can't do the Shohei Ohtani deal or maybe even just the Yoshinobu Yamamoto deal, but just about every team in the league could do this deal, the Tanner Scott deal.
Not even just about, just every team. Every
Yeah,
team could have done it.
yeah, every team could do it. It's a $72 million deal, and the Cubs were in contention. I saw I know it was reported by a variety of people, but I saw it with the Jeff Passan article about kind of his column about maybe let's not freak out about the Dodgers sort of thing. Um, but yeah, it was apparently the Cubs offered their final offer was 4 years, $66 million, and it didn't get the job done. And looking at looking at the Dodgers bullpen and the Cubs bullpen, the Cubs probably needed him a good bit more. And unfortunately, the Cubs refused to dig in on the financials, even though Tanner Scott's been one of the best relievers in baseball over the last 2 years. But they just didn't pony up and offer the most money, which is how you get these free agents. I don't think Tanner Scott had any particular bias towards the Dodgers outside of them being better than the rest of the competition. But I'm sure if the Cubs offered 76 million, that's where he would have gone. So yeah, it's unfortunate. The Cubs are out here. They got, I think, Porter Hodge is their projected closer on Fangraphs right now. I don't even know if I know who that is, but yeah, and it's something where, and I think the Cubs are projected like the 12th highest payroll in baseball, despite being a pretty big market. So yeah, it's just another example of like, yeah, the Dodgers did the thing that the other teams, should have also been trying to do.
I think the fact that the Cubs weren't willing to go an extra, what, 2 million per year for Tanner Scott instead and let him go to the Dodgers is a much worse look for baseball than the Dodgers getting him because everyone's been talking about how this is so bad for baseball, how the Dodgers keep getting these guys. The Cubs went 95% of the way there. Like it's not like the Dodgers put out this outrageous bid for a reliever where they offered him, I don't know, like 150 million. No, they offered him what relatively ended up to be market value if his next best offer was very, very close to that. And I mean, look, I know you mentioned Porter Hodge. He's actually a decent name, and I think there are a lot of interesting names at this back end of the Cubs bullpen this year. You could have made the team so much better by adding a Tanner Scott, in the back end of that bullpen. You've already added a power bat. You've solidified the rotation a little more with guys like Matthew Boyd. Like this, the Cubs could have been looked at as one of the most improved teams in the offseason if they if they made this move. And again, it took another 2 million per year. Like it's not anything crazy. They're not at the luxury tax. They're not close to it. They're projected the 12th highest payroll, like you said. I know they were over it last year, but they've taken Cody Bellinger's money off the books. They made it their way there with Tanner Scott. They just couldn't get it fully done.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not, um, yeah, as you said, 95% of the way there, and they're not a team. I think despite what Tom Ricketts wants you to believe, I think they make a lot of money. I was at Wrigley Field a couple
Yeah,
of years ago. It was, granted, I guess it was a weekend and in the summer, but the Cubs were, I think, probably like 5 games below 500 at the time, and the place was packed on Saturday and Sunday afternoon, and I'm sure tickets weren't necessarily cheap, and I'm sure they do well on merchandise and stuff like that.
they had the fifth highest attendance in the NL last year.
Fifth highest attendance in the NL, and that's not necessarily a big ballpark, or a ballpark that's going to fit like 55,000 people in it, I don't think.
No,
And yeah, I think they're one of the highest grossing revenue teams in the sport. But
that and you haven't won a playoff game since 2017.
yeah, right, right,
Like
right.
where is the urgency here?
And this is a team, all, yeah, like you're not in a good division either. You can easily
Mhm.
separate yourself. You can
Yeah,
very, very easily separate yourself. Um, and yeah, I mean, I guess I definitely credit them for the Kyle Tucker trade, but in terms of um, you know, acquiring a big piece that doesn't require them to uh trade off um trade off prospects or trade off any other players. I don't think they've actually really done that this
no,
off.
they don't even really have that many guys on the books. If they had signed Tanner Scott to this deal, he would have had the second longest remaining contract on the team behind only Dansby Swanson.
Yeah,
Unless you count Shota Imanaga's player options, which they'd be, I believe, tied.
yeah,
But in terms
exactly.
of in terms of guaranteed money, Tanner Scott would have had the second longest contract on the team.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so they haven't made any significant financial moves. I guess Kyle Tucker, they're taking on whatever, like 17 million in arbitration this year, but
16 and a half. Yeah.
16.5 million in arbitration this year. So that I think that's the biggest financial commitment they've made this off season.
Mhm.
And yeah, they're going after Scott, but apparently couldn't cough up more to get him, despite everyone not wanting not wanting the Dodgers to get even better. Yeah, no, it's it's just another situation where the Dodgers did what another franchise should have done.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm not complaining about the Dodgers here. It's just incompetency from another MLB franchise. I guess to talk about what Tanner Scott can bring to the table and analyze what he's been doing. Yeah, he's over the last 2 years, he's as I mentioned, been one of the best relievers in baseball. He kind of had a little bit of a career turnaround, which is good. After going from Baltimore to Miami, and then eventually San Diego for the past couple months of 2024. But yeah, among 74 relievers with 110 plus innings pitched over the last 2 years, Tanner Scott leads in FIP and he ranks second in ERA. And he also leads all relievers in F4 over the last 2 years. And his numbers could have been a lot better last year. He just had a really rough first maybe 10 appearances or so. But in from April 20th on last year, he put up a 1.42 ERA and 2.36 FIP. And out of 168 qualifiers in that span, his ERA ranked third and FIP ranked ninth. And then finally in 2024, he was 85th percentile or higher in expected ERA, expected batting average against, uh, fastball velocity, average exit velocity against, whiff rate, strikeout rate, barrel rate, hard hit rate, and ground ball rate, 85th percentile or higher in all of those categories. And yeah, the Dodgers are getting him, and the Cubs are unfortunately not. Despite them, they're not really that committed to anybody right now.
The going more into Tanner Scott, you mentioned the expected ERA. A lot of the reason for that, the strikeout rate obviously helps, but also the batted balls against him are excellent. 37.4% of the batted balls that he gave up last year were hit 80 miles per hour or lower. That is what's considered soft hit. That was the highest rate among every pitcher with at least 150 batted balls against last year. So out of everyone with that sample size, no one was better at getting soft contact than Tanner Scott. There's a reason why he was looked at as the best reliever in the league. Chris and I will probably have him relatively high up on our top reliever list when we do those in a few weeks from now. This guy, I know that paying relievers can often be a big risk. We saw Josh Hader implode in the playoffs last year. We saw Emmanuel Clase, who, the Guardians have paid, implode in the playoffs last year. Regardless, like the Cubs are a team that need a shutdown guy. The bullpen is filled with kind of a lot of hypotheticals. I know that there's a lot of reason to be excited about guys like Porter Hodge or Tyson Miller, but you need a established guy, especially in a division where a lot can happen. This could have really solidified this team as a clear front runner in the NL Central this offseason. And not only that, but probably could have made them a good enough team to maybe break the NL Central stigma in the playoffs if everyone stays healthy. And that's a hypothetical for every team. But regardless, the Dodgers are getting the best closer in the league to, complement the best offense and probably best rotation in the league.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the rich get richer, but I mean, it's, it wasn't they they didn't give him 30 million a year. They gave him
Yeah. They gave him a slightly bit more than the next best offer.
yeah, and they gave him, the market price. You expect that a reliever of Scott's caliber would get about
Mhm.
18 million a year, and that's what he got from
And what was
that's all
uh
it
what
took.
was the first deal that Hoffman had before it fell through? It was like 3 years and 40 million or something like that.
Yeah, maybe 39, I think, like to be
Something like
13
it was
million a
something
year.
like that. Yeah, I mean, given that's what he was worth on the basis of being healthy, yeah, I think Scott makes sense for that kind of money.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, especially just kind of given that he's above and beyond, and he was the best pitcher or the best relief pitcher on the market. Um, yeah, it's not absurd, um and yeah, like Edwin Diaz was the best pitcher on the market or best relief pitcher on the market a couple years ago. He got over 20 million a year. Not that, Scott did what Diaz did the year before, the year he entered the market, but just to give a little bit of context there. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to cry that team, a certain team can afford so much when they just gave a $72 million deal.
Yeah,
Everyone could have done this, but it just happened that the Dodgers actually went out and did it.
yeah,
And it's another thing about like the yes, the Dodgers spend more than anybody in the league, but the gap between their spending and the rest of the league spending is not as big as or is much bigger than the actual revenue gap. So it's just they've actually gone out and decided to do something. And here's the kicker is, you typically get more revenue when you actually invest in your team and people want to see your team play. But
believe it or not.
crazy concept. But yeah, anything more on this deal?
No, I think that's it.
I love how every Dodgers with every Dodgers signing, like we just get more and more rageful at the rest of the league.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's warranted each time it keeps happening.
Like yeah, they're gonna find a way to like get Flaherty on their roster, and we're just gonna be screaming at our laptop cameras.
Yeah, it's gonna be like 1 year and 22 million.
Yeah, it's gonna be like every team could have done this. Yeah.
Every team could have given him 2 years and 40. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, now on to the next deal. Kind of got swept under the radar a little bit. But Jurickson Profar, he is coming off a career year, and he just got a 3-year, $42 million deal. I think takes him through his age 34 season. And he got that with the Atlanta Braves, who have been, they've been a little bit of a rotating door, like in the corner outfield spot, or at least in left field. And then I guess general corner outfield spots with Acuna having missed some time and whatnot. But yeah, what did you think about this move?
Yeah, I mean, I think if in terms of offense, this was probably the most necessary move for the Braves to make to add another outfielder to, kind of complete that lineup a little more for when Ronald Acuna Jr. does eventually come back. Uh, they were looking at an opening day outfield of guys like Brian De La Cruz, Jarred Kelenic, and Michael Harris II. And you look at really one of those guys as, the option you'd want going forward. Acuna is obviously going to replace one of them, and now you have Jurickson Profar to really round out what that outfield will look like at full strength. You'll have Profar in left, Harris in center, and then Acuna in right with Ozuna DHing. So I mean, yeah, this is a good move for the Braves. It solidifies the lineup. Um, obviously, I think a lot of the worries with Profar and why it took him so long to sign was because last year was such a breakout year for him after so many years of expecting something like that, where it just never happened. He raised his average exit velocity by almost 5% last year. He also raised his fly ball rate marginally. He did a lot of very good things that obviously made him a much better player. The strikeout rate stayed low. The walk rates went a little up from last year. So, 3 years and 42 million, right? That's what it was.
Um, yes, 3 years and 42 million.
Yeah, I mean, if he does exactly what he did last year again for the next 3 years, this is a steal. This is an easy steal. This is one of the best free agent deals that we've seen this offseason. But if he doesn't, I think it's not a burden contract for a team that already has a lot of them anyway.
Yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, with yeah, Profar, it was just last week. We did the top 10 left fielders. I know you were close to putting him on the list. I put him number 8. And yeah, like just to talk about some of the things I already talked about with him last week is yeah, he's coming off career highs in average on base percentage, slugging, OPS plus, expected slugging, expected WOBA, average exit velocity, barrel rate, and fly ball rate. Career highs in all those. That's pretty crazy. So maybe there was a bit of a transformation that he just had in the middle of his career. And yeah, he's also coming off career lows in whiff rate and chase rate. And among current starting left fielders who qualified last year, he had the highest OPS, also had a 92nd percentile expected WOBA. And he was the only player in baseball last year to have 80th percentile average exit velocity and 90th percentile chase rate and whiff rate. So yeah, like there's a lot to be optimistic about. Unfortunately, his defense is not something to really
Rave about.
celebrate. Yeah, write home about exactly. Um, and it was a very random season. He is 2 years removed from being well below replacement, mostly as a Rocky, unfortunately. So yeah, there's an element of not necessarily knowing what to expect with Profar, but I think that's why he got 14 million a year as opposed to like 20 million a year because his wins above replacement just for 2024 alone was pretty comparable to I think um Teoscar Hernandez, who got 22 million a year. It's just Teoscar Hernandez was also good in the years before that, whereas Jurickson Profar wasn't doing that necessarily. So yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah, if Profar does does what he did last year for 3 years, that is a big time steal for the Braves. And I guess the other angle that I'm looking at here is, Acuna is going to might be out to start the year. And he might miss a little bit of time, but I don't think that's why the Braves are committing 3 years to Jurickson Profar. I think they have a lot of doubts about what Jarred Kelenic is going to bring to the table long term.
Yeah.
He's coming off a year. They traded for him. In They didn't have to trade much to get him. But they traded for him last year, and I think he put up about like an 86 OPS plus or something like that. Expected numbers were not necessarily out of the water either. He is heading into his age 25 season, so there's always room to grow, but I don't think are trying to wait patiently with Jarred Kelenic, especially as a team that's going to compete for the division this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some type of move involving him at some point, whether that's at some point this offseason or at some point in the middle of the season, because yeah, like or at least with this current roster, with Profar and left, Harrison center, Acuna and right, I guess for the long term, and then Ozuna being the DH. There's really not a spot for Kelenic out there, at least on an everyday standpoint, unless they wanted to keep him around to have him DH or have Profar DH next year. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Braves maybe move on from Kelnick if the right piece is out there that they want to trade for.
I would not have expected Kelnick only has 2 years of service time under his belt.
True, yeah,
I
right.
would have expected he had like at least four, maybe three.
Yeah, well, he's been in the league since 2021, right?
21. Well, 21, but he came up late, right? Because remember, that was the year that or was it who was it from the Mariners?
Is it
It was
Kevin Mather, I think?
Yeah, it was someone, yeah, went to the Rotary Club in Seattle and laid out all the secrets that they were going to keep Kelnick in the minors to do the service time manipulation. I would expect that he would have had 3 years of service time by now. He's only at two. He's still pre-arb. Um, could be a very interesting piece. It's one of those, the meme of the like broken record player where it says like does not work but could be fun to fix.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Could be a team looking to make a Jarred Kelenic edition.
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, I think he was my Braves player to watch.
I was going to pick him, but then I picked Aaron Bummer instead.
Yeah, well, he's just the quintessential, like, what we look at for players to watch is horrible strikeout rate, but pretty good contact numbers. So it's like,
Let's
oh, if he makes
yeah,
more contact, he might actually be really productive. But
right.
yeah,
Is he good defensively?
-3 OAA last year.
-3 OIA and also negative in on Fangraphs as well. I'm trying to think, what's a team that like could maybe try something? Maybe like the Rays.
Yeah, I could see him. I could see him having a career resurgence with the Rays.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know.
like
I'm just throwing stuff out there.
I could see
This
like
None of this is serious.
I could see mid-season, like even though both teams are good, like the Rays trade a good reliever and and get Jarred Kelenic back or something like that.
Right.
Um, one of those type
Yeah.
deals. Yeah, that would make sense. But
Maybe
yeah,
the
no, I think
Reds. Reds could be a good one.
yeah, I wonder what his pull rate might be because that would
It was
yeah
43% last year. I don't know what it was on fly balls. I'll have to check that.
yeah
He hit 15 home runs last year. He would have hit 20 if he played every game at GABP.
yeah. I think that would be good for him. But yeah, no, I think this Profar signing is definitely indicative of what the Braves think about Jarred Kelenic. If the
Hmm.
Braves were a less developed team and maybe not on in the in a very serious competitive window, they might have not made this move and might have tried to play Kelnick out. But since they're competing for a World Series this year, as they have, each of the past 6 or 7 years now, they want the best. They want the best right now. So I think that's what this Profar deal indicates.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, anything else that you had on the Profar deal?
No, I think that's kind of that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, good for Jurickson Profar because I think
Happy for him. Yeah, it's been a long time coming.
yeah, and actually yeah, yeah, something I just remembered now. I remember when I think it was like March 2 years ago. He was on the free agent market still, and I was like, when is someone going to sign Profar? Because I realized I think we were doing like the division previews, and I was talking about the additions and subtractions, and the Padre. He was like a subtraction for the Padres, and I was like, wait, he's
Hmm.
still out there? He was coming off a year, um, with about 3 wins above replacement, at least on Baseball Reference, 3 wins above replacement, a 109 OPS plus, and I was like, he could really bring a lot to the team. And he didn't. I don't think he signed for much with the Rockies, and then ultimately got traded. And now he has a $42 million deal on his hands. So yeah, I'm happy that he's able to get that deal. Definitely earned it.
For sure.
But yeah, so yeah, I think that wraps up on Profar. Now we will get into our sixth list, our sixth positional list. We have done so far first base, center field, catchers, shortstops, and
Left fielders.
left fielders. In that particular order. If you want to see some of those lists, not all of those yet, you can check out the 2025 positional rankings playlist on the Above Replacement Radio YouTube page. But yeah, this week we are doing third baseman. It's the hot corner. Look out over there. It's coming at you fast. We got the third baseman this week. It's this was another particularly interesting list. There's a lot of I think with third base particularly, there's a lot of legacy at the position. Some of the best players in the league have played there for a long time. But yeah, there's been some shuffling going on. There's been some shuffling going on, certainly more at more areas of the list than others. But yeah, and yeah, just before I lend it to you. This is a projection for 2025. This is what we think they will do in 2025. It's not fully based on past performance, but also on future potential. So that's what we're going based off of. So that's why we might reference some underlying stats like how hard they hit the ball, what direction they've been hitting the ball, things like that, because that's ultimately kind of what will determine later success. But yeah, without further ado, who's your number 10 third baseman in baseball?
So for number 10, I am beginning this list with one of my 7 returners from my third base list last year. This guy was number 9 for me heading into 2024. So you'd think not a lot has changed, and maybe this guy put up kind of the standard season that we thought he would. That's kind of far from what happened. He just got back to the same place in a very weird way. I'm talking about Royce Lewis from the Minnesota Twins. We kind of saw his ceiling and his floor last year, right? He homered in his first at bat on opening day, left that game with an injury, came back 2 months later, lit the world on fire for some time, looked like one of the best hitters in baseball. I believe I tweeted at full health, he could be a top 15 player in the entire sport. And then he just went through a major slump for the last couple months of the season, as did kind of the rest of his team. Ended up with relatively league average numbers, but you wouldn't know it from the way that he got there at all. So that being said, he's still my number 10 third baseman. I think there's still lots of like with Royce Lewis. He pulls the ball a lot. He had a 34%, he had a 30% fly ball rate last year. He pulled a lot of his fly balls, which is something you'll hear me reference a lot when talking about players. Yeah, it is obviously a very weird concept of how he got there, but I still think there's a lot of things to admire. He swung at 40% of first pitches in 2024. So in an 0-0 count, first pitch, he swung 40% of the time, which was a 9% increase over 2023, which I found interesting. He was a lot more aggressive early in counts, specifically on the first pitch, and it kind of paid off for him. He had a 320 batting average, a 620 slugging, and a 2.3 run value per 100 on first pitches in 2024, which meant that per 100 first pitches on a rate basis, he was producing a little over 2 runs approximately for the Twins based on the results he was getting. So that was something that I found very interesting about Royce Lewis, kind of the jump in aggressiveness early in counts. It seemed to really pay off for him. I'd be very interested to see if that's something that continues into 2025 and if it's something that he continues to get good results on. But regardless, I'm keeping him on my list because I think the potential is so hard to ignore. But yeah, it was a very strange season for him last year. So he is staying on my list in my number 10 spot.
Yeah. Examining Royce Lewis, it was so hard to evaluate him.
I feel like I could put him number 3 next year.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's just, yeah. But yeah, it's good to continue his existence because it's nice that he's out there existing right now. For a long time it wasn't really the case. But yeah, my number 10, this is kind of going exclusively on this guy's potential. It is Junior Caminero.
I was
Caminero.
so close. I'll just reveal right now, he's not on my list, but I was so close. I really wanted to.
Yeah, excuse me, I mispronounced. Junior Caminero of the Tampa Bay Rays. Yeah, he's the projected third baseman. He was obviously not on my list last year, but he's heading into his age 21 season. And yeah, he was a consensus top four prospect entering last year. I know the MLB .com released some of their prospect rankings, I think, this year,
He's
but
not a prospect anymore.
or oh yeah, he's not yeah, I forgot. That's why he's
Yeah.
not on the list because he's surpassed his rookie status. But if he was, yeah, if he was still a prospect, I'm sure he'd still be pretty highly ranked. He didn't necessarily do anything to um demote his case, I guess. But yeah, he was a consensus top four prospect entering last year. And in 43 games as a 20-year-old last year, he put up a 105 OPS plus, which, yeah, isn't anything crazy. He did have a high average exit velocity and he had a high barrel rate, and as well as an average strikeout rate. So usually that just leads to great success. You know, if you're hitting the ball hard and hitting hard fly balls and you don't strike out very much, usually that leads to success. It's just he needs to reduce, he needs to improve some of the directional stuff that he has. He needs to reduce his pop-up rate and ground ball rates to be very productive. I think he had a 26% speed spot rate, which is very, very low. Um, so uh so yeah, I'm really just kind of putting him on this list exclusively based on his potential because I'm just optimistic about him. Like putting up a 105 OPS plus as a 20-year-old and being as highly regarded as he is, I'm pretty optimistic about what he can do, and I think the Rays develop pretty well. So I think he can but considering he can really break out this year, I figure I put him on the list.
Very interested to see how well the ball travels or carries at George Steinbrenner Field in the summertime.
True. Totally forgot about that.
Yeah, because I
Um,
believe he came up with an 80 grade power tool.
yeah, and yeah, with the average exit velocity and the barrel rate, certainly shows that he's capable of hitting the ball hard and hitting the ball out of the ballpark. So yeah, Junior Caminero, he's my number 10. It'll be interesting to watch him this year, but yeah, he's at number 10. Who do you have at number 9?
Yeah, number 9, I have one of my three newcomers to this list, a guy that I didn't put last year. This guy also missed some of the season with injury in 2024, but I really liked what I saw out of him, both in the regular season when he was playing and also throughout the postseason. Talking about Max Muncy from the aforementioned Los Angeles Dodgers. This is a guy who has been on the Dodgers a while and is kind of forgotten as in some ways one of the premier hitters on the team. He did only put together 293 plate appearances, but in doing so, he slashed 232, 358, 494 for an 852 OPS with very good underlying numbers. As per usual, his chase rate was phenomenal at 20.3%. His walk rate was towards the top of the list at 15.4%. He obviously hit the ball very hard. He barreled it. He pulled it a ton. A 48% pull rate last year, a 43% fly ball rate, and a 25% ground ball rate, which I love. It's exactly what you should be seeing out of someone like Max Muncy. Just to give you an idea, since the start of the StatCast era, there have been exactly 3,093 seasons where a hitter has put up at least 150 batted balls. Only Mike Trout in 2022, I believe it was, put up a higher fly ball rate than Max Muncy last year. He ranks second on that list of 3,093 seasons since 2015, 43.4% fly ball rate, like I mentioned. Additionally, he had a 16.3% pulled fly ball rate last year. That was tied for second among the 343 hitters in 2024 to have at least 150 batted balls. So, I mean, when I talk about these kinds of things, Max Muncy is exactly the kind of guy I want to see something like that out of. He's a guy that's really maximizing his power by hitting the ball, in the correct spot, hitting it in the correct way. getting kind of the most out of what his potential is. And that's kind of how you see a guy like him hitting 232, right? Like when you think of guys like Max Muncy or Kyle Schwarber or Joey Gallo back in the day, you'd think of batting averages probably below 232. But if you can get it that high, and I know it's not very high, but if you can get it that high and do the things that Max Muncy does, you're looking at a very, very good hitter. He also played solid defense last year. He was average on the outs above average scale and looked good in the playoffs, made a few tough plays there for the Dodgers. If he can continue that, I think we pretty comfortably have a top 10 third baseman here. I'm putting him number 9 on my list because of the small sample size and because there were some extremes here that we'd never seen from him before. I don't know if that 43.4% fly ball rate stays the same over a full season, but to see it happen over 166 batted balls is meaningful enough for me. So I'm putting him on my list.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my number 9, it kind of feels weird putting him on here. He was not on my list last year. And I feel like he's gotten some criticism, but I think he really is starting to figure things out. I put Alec Boehm at my number 9
Ooh.
of the Philadelphia Phillies. Yeah, he's heading into his age 28 season, and he ranked 8th among third basemen in F4 last year. What kind of encourages me about him is his general improvement, especially on defense. He's been gradually improving his defense according to both outs above average and defensive runs saved. I think he was at actually +5 outs above average last year. I don't know if that sustains itself, but it shows that he's not necessarily a negative on defense, or at least for the time being, which that used to be the case for him. He's also been gradually improving his strikeout rate, and he was 92nd percentile in strikeout rate in 2024. Also put up a 79th percentile expected WOBA and 70th percentile average exit velocity. And yeah, he was still productive despite pulling only 16% of his fly balls last year. And I think he could really take the next steps with a higher pulled fly ball rate, and be even better. He had a 117 OPS plus last year, which was really good, and also +5 outs above average. So that was already productive. But if he can, pull more fly balls and get more fly balls out of the ballpark, he could be a very productive player. And along with that, he stays on the field. He's played 140 plus games each of the last 3 seasons. So I just kind of like the general reliability, at least with him, staying on the field. So yeah, I'm kind of I'm again I'm picking a little bit sort of based on his upside. I think there's still a little bit more to unlock with Alec Boehm. So I figure, this one I could really see going either direction. I could see me, flopping on my face with this one, or I could see him or I could see it paying off. So yeah, Alec Boehm, it's an interesting choice, but I have him at number 9. Who do you have at number 8?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you there's a lot of Phillies fans that'll disagree with you on that one.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, at number 8, I have one of the classics. I mean, not a legacy pick, but I mean, classic in that you know exactly what I'm going to say. I'm talking about Isaac Paredes now of the Houston Astros. I'll keep it brief because I think we all know exactly what the deal is with Isaac Paredes. He's a guy that pulls the ball a lot. He hits a lot of fly balls. And he doesn't exactly have the power, but when you do that enough, good things will happen, right? He's a guy where you have to look beyond the expected statistics to understand who he really is as a baseball player, because it doesn't take into account what part of the field you hit the ball at. 49.2% of his fly balls last year were pulled. That was the highest rate among the 101 hitters with at least 100 fly balls. And he's obviously now going to be playing in Houston, where the Crawford boxes will likely play very favorably to what he does. Not only does he pull the ball, he really pulls it. Like he's left field line kind of guy, not even like a left center kind of guy. So, I think he'll be using that part of the stadium a lot when they're playing at home. And that's obviously something that's very exciting to watch for now that he's in maybe the most favorable ballpark for him. One other thing, I wanted to have something on him that was beyond the usual stuff. From March through June of last year, Isak Paredes had a 28.6% chase rate, and from July through September, it dropped to 24.2%. So that is just another thing that he improved on throughout the course of the season. If we could see something like that for him next year, we could see a drop in strikeout rate overall, which would be beneficial because that's more batted balls, and with more batted balls usually comes more pulled fly balls that will become home runs in Houston. So for that reason, I'm putting him on my list. If he was still a Cub, I don't even know if he'd be on this list or not, to be honest. But he got traded to where I think he belongs, and I'm very excited to see what this will look like this year.
Yeah, yeah. The Isak Paredes and Houston Astros coupling is the only like celebrity couple I root for. It's like
Real,
I'm like this is a match made in heaven. But
yeah, we ship it for sure.
yes, indeed, we stand. My number 8 is the actually last of my three newcomers. Everyone else on this list is going to be a returner. But yeah, he's a newcomer. And yeah, had his first, I guess, pseudo full year in MLB last year. I'm talking about Jordan Westburg of the Baltimore Orioles. I had him as a player to watch last year, and he was one of my hits. And I guess that's why I'm still a little bit passionate about him. But yeah, he's heading into his age 26 season, and he put up a 129 OPS plus in 447 plate appearances in 2024. And he put up +5 outs above average at the third base position. It's a little bit tricky with Jordan Westburg because if you go on his baseball savant page, it says he has -5 outs above average, but that's because he had like I think -8 at second base and then -2 at shortstop. But breaking it down, he was actually a very good defensive third baseman, but his overall outs above average was dragged down because of his play at second base and shortstop. So yeah, I'm kind of going based off of what he did at third base. And also on the offensive front, out of 29 third basemen with 400 plus plate appearances, Jordan Westburg ranked fourth in weighted runs created plus and third in expected WOBA. So his expected numbers were certainly up there, and his actual numbers were also up there. As exemplified with the 129 OPS plus. And also he was 80th percentile or higher in average exit velocity, sweet spot rate, and barrel rate, and was 88th percentile or higher in all expected categories. So yeah, I think we're kind of seeing the beginning with Jordan Westburg. I'm really pumped on what he did this past year, and I think he could be another great product of the Orioles player development. And yeah, that's why he earns my number 8 spot in 2020 for 2025. Who do you have at number 7?
Yeah, number 7. This is where I get into kind of the legacy picks here. Guy that's been a staple at third base for a while. Maybe going to a different team, maybe staying with his former team. I guess he is a free agent. I'm talking about Alex Bregman, of course. Formerly, maybe continuously with the Houston Astros. I believe the report is that the Astros have 6 years and $156 million on the table. But he is still a free agent as we speak. There has been a bit of an offensive decline, but I think all of the essential qualities of Alex Bregman are still there. He's still not striking out very much. His whiff rate is very good. His chase rate is very good. He's still playing stellar defense. He put up 6 outs above average at shortstop or at third base last year, rather. And he's still pulling the ball a decent amount. It was his lowest pull rate in a while, but 39 is still very good. Like I mentioned, the league average is quite less than that. He's still pulling his fly balls. He's still hitting a decent amount of fly balls, even if it did go down a bit last year. I'm still very optimistic that we can see a strong season out of him in the coming year. Obviously, it will depend largely on where he goes, but I think there's still good reason to believe in him. Despite this decline, he did post his career highest hard hit rate in 2024. He did also post his best barrel rate on fly balls since 2018. So when he was hitting fly balls, he was hitting them very hard. Maybe he wasn't always going to the right place, but I think that is some kind of encouragement that maybe the decline won't continue. We can continue to see, OPSs around the 800s with stellar defense. So I'm still very optimistic on Alex Bregman. Of course, there are a lot of underlying factors about his next season that we don't know. largely where he's going to be playing and how his new home ballpark, or maybe if he'll be staying in Houston, how it will fit him. But I'm keeping him on my list. He's my number 7.
Right.
And he last year he was my number 4.
Yep. Now we get into, before we get into my number 7, this is kind of where my list gets very close. Like my 3 through 7, I can speak for myself, was very interchangeable. I don't think my number 3 is really that much better than my number 7. And with that being said, I have my pick at 7 is probably a little bit against the baseball consensus. I have Rafael Devers at number 7
Whoa.
for the second year in a
Whoa.
Yeah, I had him at number 7 last year as well. But yeah, he's heading into his age 28 season. He ranked third among third basemen in F4 last year, and he ranks fifth over the last 2 years. And yeah, I guess with Rafael Devers, like we've been talking about his potential and how he can have a breakout year for a while. And with him being 28 right now, I'm kind of sick of talking about that potential. Granted, yes, he's still a very productive hitter. A 132 OPS plus over the last 2 seasons. But yeah, he hasn't hit that elite tier yet, and I can't necessarily think that he will, because it's been kind of 3 years in a row we've been waiting on that. So until he gets there, I'm not gonna consider him along with that kind of elite tier. He's been about the same player each of the last 4 years. He's averaged 4.2 F4 per year, -7 outs above average, and a 132 OPS plus over those last 4 years. I think what kind of drags him down this list is he is one of the worst defenders among this group. Um, Maybe the worst defender, and I don't think he's necessarily a disaster on defense. It's just he happens to be worse than a lot of the top third basemen in baseball, in my opinion. And yeah, I don't think his offense uh, necessarily makes up for it. I think he would have to. I'd have to think that he's going to put up, like a 150 OPS plus to put him above a lot of these guys. But based on what he's done, I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's kind of going to remain in like the 130s, maybe touch 140. But yeah, it's a pick where I really hope to be wrong. I really want to see that breakout season out of Rafael Devers, but yeah, it just unfortunately hasn't happened yet. I expect him to be productive, like 4 wins above replacement. If you're guaranteeing me 4 wins above replacement out of a player every single year, I think that's a very good player. But I don't think it's I don't think MLB Network had him number 2. I don't think he's at that tier yet, and I think it would be either a little bit premature, or maybe you're looking at the wrong stuff if you're putting him number 2. But yeah, so who do you have at number 6?
Number 6, this is where I start maybe going off the beaten path a little bit. I don't think this guy was in MLB Network's top 10, I believe, but he was much lower than 6th. I'm talking about Eugenio Suarez, who I loved watching in the second half of last year. He was everything that I kind of enjoy out of guys like him, like I mentioned, very similar with what I mentioned with Muncy, but this time above average defense, a great sweet spot rate, 40% of batted balls in the sweet spot for him, an 11% barrel rate, and overall, the 788 OPS is a little misleading because he was not very good in the first couple months of the season, but he was one of the best hitters in the league as we went down the stretch of the season there, which was a lot of fun. Like I mentioned, from July through the end of the season, Eugenio Suarez pulled 49.4% of his fly balls, the highest of the aforementioned 101 hitters with at least 50 batted balls throughout that span. He had a 974 OPS from July on. I think we could really see a closer version of that Eugenio Suarez throughout the 2025 version. I think he's much closer to that than most people might think if he can continue to do that throughout the season. And he did it for 3 months. I feel very optimistic that he could do it for 6. Arizona has been a hitter-friendly ballpark in many instances, especially with some of these power hitters. And I think Suarez can be a guy that absolutely plays in favor of that. If he continues to pull the ball like he did, which, he's had a pull rate above 40% in each of the last seasons since 2019. We saw it to an extreme degree on his fly balls last year, and I feel very optimistic to believe that we can see that again. He also dropped his strikeout rate below 30% this year. It went to 27.5%, which is really solid to see. Like I mentioned, the 40% sweet spot rate was awesome. 26% line drive rate, a 33% fly ball rate, a higher fly ball rate than ground ball rate, which is, again, what you want to see out of guys like that. I feel very optimistic, like I said, that I think what we saw out of him in the second half is very close to what he really is. And if we can see that in a full season, I think we're looking at a very strong player. So I am indeed looking at Eugenio Suarez in my number 6 spot.
Yeah, I figured you would be high on him. I remember like, how about that? I'll usually forget, specific things about them, but
Mm-hmm.
um
He had
the
pulled like 70% of his fly balls over the span that I was talking about. It was ridiculous.
it was a thing where like I think sometimes because I'm not necessarily talking. Sometimes I might zone out sometimes on on players to highlight and stuff, and like it didn't hit me until I re-listened back, and I was like, wait, that's he actually said 70% of
Yeah,
fly balls
dude,
were
if you
pulled.
look at I remember looking at his I was examining him for a how about that, and I looked at his spray chart of fly balls and started laughing.
Yeah.
I like had to take it in. It was like a magical sight,
Looking at the data and simply laughing.
literally.
But yeah, no, I figured you'd have him on this list, and yeah, he was in great consideration for me. But my number 6 is Isaac Paredes.
Hmm.
He was my number 9 last year. And I got a whole monologue on Isaac Paredes. I'm not gonna lie, just because there's so much to dive into,
Yeah.
and so much to kind of contextualize, maybe his career and what his year was last year. But yeah, to in with the simple stuff, he's heading into his age 26 season. He's actually younger than I thought he was, but he came up in the league very young, and he's already been on, he's now on his third team, but don't let that fool you. He's a very good player. He ranked ninth among third basemen in F4 last year, and he ranks fourth over the last 2 years. He's a fairly average defender. But yeah, now onto the more complex stuff, and things that you've probably referenced when you talked about him. Among 94 hitters with 750 plus batted balls over the last 2 years, Isaac Paredes has the highest rate of batted balls being pulled fly balls. And among 85 hitters with 200 plus fly balls, he is the highest rate of fly balls being pulled. So yeah, out of 85, highest rate of fly balls being pulled. With the Rays in 2023 and 2024, he combined for a 134 weighted runs created plus. Then he got traded to the Cubs and put up an 86 weighted runs created plus. However, with the Cubs, his road weighted runs created plus was 159. But unfortunately, that home weighted runs created plus was -2. Um, the and yeah, this is why I mentioned the pulled fly ball rate, is because the Rays ballpark is 315 feet down the left field line, and the Cubs ballpark is 355 feet down the left field line. And this offseason, he was traded to the Astros, whose ballpark is 315 feet down the left field line, like the Rays. And it's even a little bit more advantageous because the Rays ballpark, it kind of juts out a little bit. With the Astros ballpark, it doesn't necessarily do that. It stays short for a little while. That's the Crawford boxes situation. But yeah, with him being traded to the Astros, it would be logical to expect him to perform at the level he was performing at with the Rays, which resulted in a weighted runs created plus over 130. And yeah, I mentioned he had a 134 combined weighted runs created plus with the Rays in 2023 and 2024 before he got traded, and that weighted runs created plus ranked second among qualified third basemen in that span. So yeah, like I think it might be consensus to have someone like Rafael Devers over Isaac Paredes. But with me looking at Isaac Paredes and him now not being on the Cubs anymore, I see him getting back to that 134 weighted runs created plus level, and that's kind of where Rafael Devers is at right now. And Isaac Paredes plays better defense and he's younger, so that's why I put him above Rafael Devers, because I truly believe that he will get back to that level that he was at with the Rays, um and it was a really good level. I mean, he hit 31 home runs in 2023. He was probably on a similar pace if he hadn't got traded. So in 2024, and then also I think the ball was deadened a little bit, so maybe that factored into him having a little bit less home runs. But yeah, no, I'm optimistic about what Paredes can bring to the table, because we've already seen what he can bring to the table. He was just traded to the worst team possible. Thank
Literally the worst team possible.
Yes, I mean it's the deepest down the left field line in MLB, and he's known for pulling fly balls, and he's a righty, by the way. If anyone, I'm sure that was implied. But yeah, I mean, thank God the Cubs actually, were able to get something out of that, because it wasn't going to work out. Thank God they were actually able to get Kyle Tucker out of that deal, because otherwise it could have been a disaster for them. And I'm really happy for ultimately I'm really happy for Isaac Paredes that he gets to play for a team where that ballpark is actually going to reward him, and not be the worst possible situation for him. But yeah, that's why I have Isaac Paredes at number 6. Who do you have at number 5?
Yeah, number 5, I have the guy that I put at number 6 last year, another one of my returners, another one of the legacy picks. I'm going with Manny Machado from the San Diego Padres. Another very interesting year for him. He started the year coming off of surgery, in which he was playing DH for the first month or so of the season, and then kind of eased his way back into playing third. So when you look at the defense, especially on Fangraphs, and see a bad number, I think a large part of that was due to the fact that he was playing DH for some time. Took him a while to really find his own groove, but then he kind of found it towards the end of the year. There are still a few things that I didn't love. I didn't love to see that there was a 6%, nearly 7% decrease in fly ball rate last year. I don't think that's who Manny Machado is, and I think I would like to see him hitting, 28.9% fly balls and not 22%. But regardless, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt of he had that surgery, and that left him off the marks a bit for a little bit. Regardless, all the other stuff is still there. The exit velocity was still solid. He's hitting the ball hard. The bat speed was very quick last year. He was averaging a fast swing, which not a lot of people do. He was barreling above 11% of batted balls, which, is very good. That's what I want to see out of him. One thing of note is, like I mentioned, the in-season improvement. He had a 7.8% barrel rate from March through June and a 14% barrel rate from July through September. His OPS went from 727 from March through June, and then 872 from July through September. So we kind of saw more of the Manny Machado that we know and have gotten to know in the last few months of the season. I'm pretty sure that he could probably do that again. Like I mentioned, I didn't love the decrease in fly balls. Even with the early stuff, I still don't love what the final number came out to be. So that does concern me a bit. It's going into age 32 this year. Yeah, we're just gonna have to see. But I did bring him up on my list from last year. I brought him into the top 5. Yeah, I have Manny Machado in my 5.
Yeah, yeah. My number 5 is Alex Bregman. He was my number 5 last year, and just like last year, I don't have too much to say on him. He's been good. He's been good. He hasn't been elite, but he's been good, and he hasn't really strayed away from that since 2021, since he's been fully healthy. He's just kind of had, very productive seasons each of the last 3 years. Right now, he's heading into his age 31 season. He ranked 4th among third basemen in F4 in 2024, and he actually ranked 2nd over the last 2 years. And yeah, he's averaging a 120 OPS plus and +4 outs above average over the last 2 years. I guess the one concern that may lie with him is in his plate discipline, and obviously his plate discipline was still actually very good. It's just it dropped off from how elite it usually was. Excuse me. And what I when I talk about that, I say I'm talking about his chase rate increasing 5 percentage points from 2023 to 2024, and also his walk rate, almost as a result of that, decreased 5.8 percentage points. And that I was wondering why his expected WOBA went down, or general expected numbers went down. Because his exit velocity, his barrel rate kind of stayed the same. It's because his walk rate dropped, and that's maybe why his general offensive production wasn't as high as it was, maybe 2 years ago. But yeah, I still think he's going to be a productive player. This ranking could change based on what ballpark he plays in next year. So it's subject to be tentative. But yeah, no, Alex Bregman, he's still a very good third baseman. Didn't really do anything that made me want to move him up or down. So that's why he stays at number 5 for me. Who do you have at number 4?
Yeah, number 4, I have Austin Riley, who was my number 2 last year. He is moving down a bit on the list, not because of anything he did. I just like the guys ahead of him. He did start out struggling last season, but then found his way back to being Austin Riley before his season unfortunately ended with an injury in mid-August. Overall, it was a bit of a decline. It was a 30-point drop in batting, or 25-point drop in batting average. 33% drop or 23% drop in OBP, significant drop in slugging. And the results just weren't there. But a lot of the underlying numbers still were. The exit velocity actually went up by a mile per hour. The expected slugging stayed pretty close to the same. The expected WOBA only went down by 4 points. Strikeout rate stayed relatively the same. The walk rate stayed relatively the same. And the underlying numbers went up. The line drive rate went up, the fly ball rate went up, the ground ball rate went down. All the good stuff that I like to see. He did pull a lot less than he did in previous years, which I didn't love, but regardless, that did happen. And he still really hasn't learned how to hit fastballs, unfortunately, four seamers more specifically. He had a -7 run value on four seamers last year, which is why he's only at number 4. But another reason why he's at number 4 is simply because he hits the ball incredibly hard. Defense has never really known what to think of him in terms of DRS and outs above average. They've always been kind of confused on Austin Riley. So I'm going to say he's just fine. He barreled 15% of the balls that he hit last year, which was awesome. Still had the X slugging over 500, which is kind of just all the makings of an elite hitter. I still believe that Austin Riley possesses all of those. Last year, he had a 44% ground ball rate and a 10% barrel rate from opening day through June 13. I know it's a randomly specific date, but after that is when he started to turn things around. He had a 618 OPS after June 13th, and from June 14th through August 18th, when his season ended, he had a 28% ground ball rate, which is a 16% decrease, and a 19.2% barrel rate, which was a 9% increase. And his OPS over the last 2 months of his season was 942. So we got to see the Austin Riley, much like Manny Machado, the one that we have gotten to know in those last couple of months. And I'm pretty sure it can be back most certainly in 2025. He's remaining in my top 5. I still believe he's one of the elite third basemen of the game, and he's going in my number 4 spot.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, my number 4 is Manny Machado, who, like Bregman, I have him at the exact same ranking that I had him last year. Manny Machado was my number 4 also last year. And yeah, with Manny Machado, he's heading into his age 32 season. So yeah, despite him playing for so long in the league, he's still, still has some years left to him. He ranked 7th in F4 among third basemen in 2024 and ranks 8th over the last 2 years. And as you kind of prefaced before, he had elbow surgery in the offseason heading into last year, and I think that really seemed to hold him back early on. I think he was still kind of recovering and working some things out. But ultimately, he put up a 904 OPS in his final 83 games, and he ranked top 25 among all position players in F4 in that 83 game span to close out the year. He also had +3 outs above average from July on, as opposed to -4 in May and June. Also, he was a DH for most of April, which skewed his WAR a little bit because obviously with being a DH, you don't bring any defensive value. So it dropped his defensive runs above average, which ultimately dropped his wins above replacement. So I think if he was playing third base the whole year last year, he would have been above some of these guys in terms of WAR rankings. So yeah, with I don't expect him to be at a 904 OPS necessarily, but in terms of what he evened out to and what his final product was last year, I kind of expect that along with good defense again from him in 2025. I expect that outs above average to rise back up to around what it used to be, or even just like +4, +5. So if he has like a 125 OPS plus and +5 outs above average, I think he'll be a really productive player, and that's kind of what I expect out of him, which is why I have him at number 4. But yeah, who do you have at number 3?
Yeah, number 3, there is some disagreement here. You have him at number 7. I'm talking about Rafael Devers, who, unlike many of the legacy third basemen on this list, did not see a decline in production in 2024. We've talked about Bregman having a bit of a decline in results. We've talked about it with Machado. We've talked about it with Riley. Nolan Arenado, I imagine, didn't make either of our lists because of it. Rafael Devers was battling injury for a lot of last year. He was up and down the IL. If you watched him through down the stretch last year, he clearly wasn't right. There was a lot that just looked like it was missing from his swing, from his play style, the thing that Chris and I have been watching since 2017. And despite that, he still put up an 870 OPS. He actually had a better OPS than he did in 2023. And all the expected numbers were still there. Like I mentioned, the hard hit rate was up, the barrel rate was at 13%, the average exit velocity was over 93 miles per hour, the expected WOBA was above 360. I understand that with the defense, that the defense is what it is, and that's why he's not higher on this list for me. But all of the underlying numbers are still very much there, and the results actually stayed with it. I also like, this is something that I talk about a lot. Rafael Devers hit four-seam fastballs very well. He had a 71% hard hit rate on four-seamers. That was the third highest hard hit rate among the 327 hitters to have at least 50 batted balls against four-seamers last year. Only James Wood and Fernando Tatis Jr. had higher hard hit rates against four-seamers. The pull rate was low, but Rafael Devers doesn't really need to pull the ball. Would he be optimized for it? Sure. But Fenway, even then, like, he has enough opposite field power to still hit 30 home runs a year. At Fenway, it might even be better for him because it is, more shallow out there, easier for extra base hits. The walk rate also went up last year. He hit a walk rate above 10% for the first time in his career. It was 11.1%. And I don't know. I think I just really still liked what I saw. The line drive rate went up by nearly 4%, or by over 4% this year. And like I mentioned, all of this was still playing through injury. So, I still think that Rafael Devers is in that elite tier of third baseman. We saw the results last year, and he is in my number 3 spot.
Right, right. Yeah. And yeah, like I mentioned, the difference between my number 3 and my number 7
Very
is
interchangeable.
minuscule. Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if we were doing a draft of like a team, and instead of my number 3 and my number 7 are on the board, and someone takes my number 3 but I still get my number 7, I'm not really that
Complaining.
bummed out. Um
Forgot to mention one last stat. Rafael Devers had a 5% increase in sweet spot rate in 2024. 60% of the balls that he hit in the sweet spot were over 100 miles an hour. And that was the second highest rate among the 179 hitters with at least 100 batted balls in the sweet spot. He was second only to Juan Soto. So when he was hitting the ball in the sweet spot, he was also crushing it.
right, right, right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I hope he definitely takes that next step. My number 3 is Austin Riley. He was my number 2 last year. And yeah, although yeah, he definitely had a drop in production last year, but I'm kind of sort of sticking by his side because of the underlying stuff, and also the things you talked about with how he ended the year. But ultimately, boiling it down, he ranks 6th among third basemen in F4 over the last 2 years. He missed the final 38 games of last year with a broken hand after getting hit by a pitch. And he put up at least five F4 each of the 3 seasons before that. So, it shows that in full seasons he's been a really, really productive player. Last year his WOBA went down 25 points from 2023 to 2024, but his expected WOBA only went down 4 points, and his slugging went down 55 points, but his expected slugging only went down 11. So, to sum it up, he dropped in production, but he should not have really dropped much at all, based on his expected numbers. His pulled fly ball rate actually went up by 0.1 percentage points, so it wasn't necessarily that. And his average exit velocity and barrel rate increased from 2023 to 2024. His issue, I guess, specifically was pulling barrels. Um, you know, he was having a tough time with that. But if he pulled only 4 more of his barrels, he'd be above his 2023 rate, and that was when he hit 37 home runs. So I think it's a very fixable thing, and I think it's kind of a small sample size to go off of, and not necessarily anything to put any concern over, but just kind of boiling it down, like you know, he in 2023, he put up a 130 OPS plus. He hit 37 home runs, and his average exit velocity and barrel rate actually got better from there. So that I'm very optimistic about. And then also he ended the year very well. He in his final 57 games put up a 942 OPS, which is very, very good. And among third basemen, from in his final 57 games, he ranked third in FWAR. So yeah, I think yeah, I put him at number 3 just because I think last year was a little bit fluky, especially on the results side. I expect him to be a really, really good hitter, as well as someone who can play like 150 games and put up relatively average defense, for his team. So yeah, I think I really see potential for him to get back to what he was in 2021, 2022, and 2023. And not only do I see potential for it, but I kind of expect it. So yeah, I have him at number 3. Who do you have at number 2?
Yeah, number 2, I have a guy that kind of resurged in 2024, put up the best season that we've seen from him in a very long time. I'm talking about Matt Chapman from the San Francisco Giants. The underlying numbers have always been there for him. We just haven't really seen the results come out in full. And I wouldn't say we saw them come out in full last year, but we definitely saw them come out a lot more than we have in the past. Matt Chapman had a 93 mile per hour average exit velocity last year. His bat speed was 76 miles per hour, 76 and a half, 97th percentile. The barrel rate was 12.6%. The hard hit rate was near 50%. There's a lot of things that he always did well, just didn't really see the full fruits of. We finally got to see it to a much closer degree. A 463 slugging percentage in 2024, an OPS near 800. Not only that, but we really got to see the peak of his defense come back. We saw 11 outs above average and I believe 15 defensive runs above average. Very much what we're used to seeing with Matt Chapman back through his A's days. We saw maybe it's just a Bay Area thing. Maybe he just only knows how to play defense when he's not in Canada. But it was an awesome season for him last year, giving him a well-deserved extension after a weird free agency. He's an elite fielder and still has and always has been. He had a very good base running year last year as well. The sprint speed's still very good, and he's making good base running decisions. The walk rate was at 10% last year, which is around where it's usually been. He did drop his strikeout rate to the lowest point it's been at since 2019, which is obviously a huge thing for someone like him, in terms of getting those results that we've always waited to see. And he's still hitting the ball very hard. There's just so much that he did very well last year. That was awesome. He put up his second qualifying season with an average exit velocity and outs above average, both in the 95th percentile or higher. And he is the only player since 2016, when outs above average became a stat, to have done that multiple times. He did it in 2019, I believe. It was either 2019 or 21. And he did it again in 2024. Only player to do so in multiple different seasons.
Yeah, Matt Chapman certainly broke out again last year, and yeah, I mean he was rewarded. He got a 6-year deal with the Giants, I think in the middle of the season, which was pretty cool. But yeah, Matt Chapman also gets my number 2 spot. He was my number 8 third baseman last year, and certainly rises up the list. He is heading into his age 32 season. He ranked second among third basemen in F4 last year, and he ranks third over the last 2 years. And he put up a 3-year high in outs above average and tied for the league lead among third basemen in outs above average last year. And he also put up 5-year highs in batting average, OPS plus, and home runs, and a 5-year low in strikeout rate. So just really improved just about every aspect of his game to a great degree. He was 70th percentile or higher in walk rate, chase rate, expected WOBA, and expected slugging, and was 85th percentile or higher in barrel rate, average exit velocity, and bat speed. Also, interestingly enough, and I don't know how much to rely on it for this year, but his sprint speed has increased each of the last 3 years. And he's actually he's very fast, which I didn't, for some reason I wasn't expecting, and maybe I don't watch him closely enough, but he's a pretty fast player, and he ended up stealing a career high 15 stolen bases on just 17 attempts in 2024. Now, I would be surprised if he stayed at that level, but um, at that level of base running, and I would generally be surprised if he stayed at his 2024 level. Like, he put up 5.5 F4, and I think maybe where he'll balance out is a little bit below that, but he was still significantly above all, he played significantly above all but one third baseman in baseball last year, and he was pretty productive before that as well. So he earns the number 2 spot for 2025 because yeah, I just think he was pretty above and beyond last year, and it wasn't necessarily completely out of nowhere. He was still pretty productive in like 2023 and 2022. But yeah, now on to the number 1 third baseman in baseball.
And I'm gonna let you take the floor on it.
You let me take the floor. All right.
This is your moment.
Yeah.
I can't. What, you want me to talk about this guy? No,
I'm really banking on a bounce back year from Ke'Bryan Hayes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, no, the number 1 third baseman in baseball. Let's stop joking around. This is serious business because Jose Ramirez once again is the best third baseman in baseball heading into 2025. So yeah, just with the basic stuff, he's heading into his age 32 season. He led third baseman in F4 last year, and he leads over the last 2 years. He also leads over the last 3 years, over the last 4 years, over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 years. He leads third baseman in F4. He put up a 6-year high in fly ball rate and a 3-year high in pull rate, and was rewarded with 39 home runs to tie a career high. Also, he also stole a career high 41 stolen bases while putting up a 65% extra base taken rate. And he put up +3 outs above average on defense, and has put up at least 3 outs above average in every non-COVID season since the stats started being tracked in 2016. So, just like last year and many years before, there are no better third basemen than Jose Ramirez.
Excellent. I'll add a couple things. He's obviously my number 1 third baseman as well. Since 2017, Jose Ramirez has pulled 48.3% of his total batted balls, and that is tied for the highest among the 255 hitters with at least 1,250 batted balls in that span. He has also pulled 39.4% of his fly balls. That is the highest of the 173 hitters with at least 400 fly balls since 2017. He is still not striking out, not a particularly high amount. The walk rate did go down a little bit last year, but it's still to a very good point. He had a 335 OBP last year, and a 537 slugging. You kind of said most of what needed to be said. There's really not much else to say. You are the Jose Ramirez guy on this podcast, so I'll leave everyone with Chris's thoughts on Jose Ramirez.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, one home run shy of a 40-40 season.
And he also only played 161 games.
Yeah, true.
Or well, the Guardians did. I don't know if he did.
Yeah. yeah, 40 home runs, 39 home runs, 41 stolen bases. I know those are really complicated stats. Those are nerd stats that we're talking
Mhm.
about to justify Jose Ramirez's case. But yeah, no, he's excellent. He's remained excellent. And yeah, it feels somewhat vindicating to have MLB Network put him number one. Just but
Finally.
but like there really was no other option for 2025. Uh,
No.
last year they put Austin Riley. Look how that turned out for them. And I think years before that I think they had Manny Machado in 2023. Um, so and
That
Jose
one might have been a little bit more valid though.
Yeah, he was coming off an MVP finalist season for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but I think Jose Ramirez had the better historic track record, and in 2023, Jose Ramirez was better than was better than Manny Machado. Yeah, he was better than
Yes.
Manny Machado. So and Nolan Arenado. Um, so yeah, it's just he's so consistent, and that's why I have to put him number one. And yeah, surely there could be another third baseman that has a better year than him this year, but I still expect him to be very productive. 5, 6 wins above replacement. He hasn't had that crazy season. I never expect him to put up 8 or 9 wins above replacement in a year, but he's just so consistent that I know he will always be good, and you can't say that about every player on this list. So yeah, wonderful to put Jose Ramirez number one again. And yeah, we both felt very, very correct last year when he did end up being the best third baseman in baseball. When a lot of people were putting Austin Riley above him. So yeah, good to see him get the recognition. But yeah, want to review your 10 through 1 at third base.
Yes, my 10 through 1. So at number 10, I had Royce Lewis. Number 9, Max Muncy. Number 8, Isaac Paredes. Number 7, Alex Bregman. Number 6, Eugenio Suarez. Number 5, Manny Machado. Number 4, Austin Riley. Number 3, Rafael Devers. Number 2, Matt Chapman. And number 1, Jose Ramirez.
At my number 10, I had Junior Caminero. At number 9, I had Alec Boehm. At number 8, I had Jordan Westberg. Number 7, Rafael Devers. Number 6, Isaac Paredes. Number 5, Alex Bregman. Number 4, Manny Machado. Number 3, Austin Riley. Number 2, Matt Chapman. And number 1, Jose Ramirez.
I thought that me not putting Arenado was going to be like a hot take. I'm glad you're with me on that one.
Yeah, I definitely considered him, but
He was my number 11.
yeah, he was there. He was in consideration. Just the same way, yeah, what I'll say, the same way my 3 through 7 was really interchangeable. My 9 through like 15, I was kind of jumbled between a lot of guys. Like I had like Max Muncy was I think the first guy I had off the list. He I was really considering him for a spot on this list. Nolan Arenado as well, just because he's been an average offensive player and a very good defender. And then I also considered Eugenio Suarez, Royce Lewis, uh, Mark Vientos because we didn't put him in the first base list because we figured he would actually play third base, but he might actually play first base.
Yeah.
And he only played 4 games at first base last year, so felt kind of weird to put him there based on like a possibility. And then also I considered Joey Ortiz because he led all third basemen in outs above average last year. But yeah, no, Nolan Arenado, yeah, I it's just we haven't seen it in like we're 3 years removed from an MVP finalist season from him, but it's been 3 years. So um gotta and he's 33, I think now. 30.
Yeah.
So um and a lot of the underlying stuff has gotten worse too. Um but uh but yeah, no, that was probably a take on both of our parts. I think MLB Network might have had him at number 7 last year, or at number 7 on their list. Or actually, we should review because it is out there. Um,
Yeah, hang on, I'll check it. I don't know if it's still pinned or not on their Instagram. They used to do that. Yeah, no, they pinned the Hall of Fame stuff.
Top 10.
They released the top 100 released the shortstop list, which was tough. They used the correct 10. They just put Bobby Witt Jr. at number 4.
That was crazy.
Yeah, you can't be doing that.
Um, so yeah, they had MLB Network had Eugenio Suarez number 10, Isaac Paredes number 9, Max Muncy number 8, Nolan Arenado number 7, Matt Chapman
Number
number
6.
6,
That's
uh,
tough.
Austin Riley at 5, Manny Machado at 4, Alex Bregman at 3, Rafael Devers at number 2, and Jose Ramirez at number 1. So yeah, I'm even further off on Rafael Devers with MLB Network, and then we're both we're both off on Matt Chapman, but
Yeah,
uh,
I'm okay. I feel confident on our stance.
I think the guys that came off my list last year were Nolan Arenado, Key Brian Hayes, and one other person. I forget the other person, but
For me, it was Arenado, Hayes, and Gunnar Henderson.
oh yeah, Gunnar Henderson.
Yeah, because we had
Right.
him as a third baseman last year.
That's who it was. Okay.
Yep.
But yeah, anything more before we wrap this up?
Yeah, let's talk about the Hall of Fame election that happened this past week. Um,
Yeah, true.
Ichiro, first ballot Hall of Famer, 99.7%. Find that one guy. We need to talk. Um, CC Sabathia is a guy that I think is a great symbol of the progress that the BBWAA has made over the last few years that goes unnoticed because it still has a lot of clear issues. But he got in first ballot, 86%. Very happy for him. He is a Hall of Famer. They got it right with him. It's very simple. They get it wrong with these guys in the sense that they make them wait a few years. Like Mike Mussina had to wait like 4 years, which is ridiculous. CC Sabathia was a Hall of Fame pitcher. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with his Hall of Fame candidacy, but I do think there have been a lot of people looking at him going in first year and thinking, oh, I don't know about first year. It's like, well, you do know about first year. There have just been so many people that deserve to go in first year that didn't, to where CC makes it look bad that he's the one and not everyone else. In reality, the writers are getting better at this. There's obviously still a lot of issues. The fact that there's someone out there that didn't feel the need to vote Ichiro is a large issue in and of itself and representative of many other issues as well. But uh, they got it right with CC. Very happy to see him get in on the first try because he deserves it. And a big win for ARR, a big win for our coverage of the Hall of Fame process throughout the years. Billy Wagner in his 10th and final year, getting in at 82% of the vote. This one's been a long time coming for this show. Really setting the standard, I would say, for relievers in some way, right? I mean, he made it essentially on the bare minimum way of getting in last year, 82% of the vote. A 187 ERA plus, 231 ERA, and 900 innings pitched. I don't know if guys like Kimbrel and Chapman and Jansen are going to get to those numbers. They're all in the 150s for ERA plus. So if Billy Wagner is kind of the limit of what you're allowed to do as a reliever to get into the Hall of Fame, he might be one of the last relievers we ever see enter the Hall of Fame. They're gonna have to change their standards if this is the bare minimum. But regardless, he got in. I'm very happy to see it. The video of him reacting to getting the call was really emotional. It was awesome. It almost made me cry as someone who's been fighting this good fight for about 5 years now. And there's a lot of other down ballot things we'll talk about later. Chris, what were your initial reactions to the 3 new inductees?
Um, yeah, I think the best story out of it is the Billy Wagner election. Like, obviously, there's so much kind of anxiety built in um with being in your 10th year on the ballot. Yeah, he's been like it's been at least a thought in his mind for 10 years, and I think he's someone who's been kind of vocal about following it fairly closely and wanting, being passionate about wanting to be in the Hall of Fame, and hoping that he gets that recognition. And it's a really feel good thing to see him uh get that recognition, and it's very well deserved. Yeah, and it was a pretty cool thing. Like, we've both had the pleasure of meeting Billy Wagner. You at the Cape Cod Hall of Fame induction of him, and he coaches he coaches a high school baseball team that's about 20 minutes from where I live. So, and I'm the high school sports reporter, so I've interviewed him a few times.
Really
And
good too, right?
Miller School, they made the state championship last year, so
Yeah.
hoping they you know they got a good leader, so they're in a good spot. And yeah, I actually was covering a Miller School boys basketball game after, and I interviewed the basketball coach, and I was like, hey, if it hasn't been broken to you yet, Billy Wagner got inducted. And uh and he was like, oh yeah, the as soon as the game ended, the one of my assistants told me and made sure to tell me, and he was, there, everyone at Miller School was really supporting him, and I'm sure that maybe the video of some of his players reacting on like, I think it was a Zoom call or like a Skype or something, um, that's been going around the internet. So um, it's just a really cool thing. I know Billy Wagner mentioned the state of Virginia in his um, sort of interview after getting inducted. So that's certainly the feel good story of it. I'm also glad CC Sabathia got that recognition because that was well earned. I'm definitely glad Ichiro got in. Maybe the unpopular thing is I'm not really worried about the unanimity with him. I think
I'm
that
not either. There's no point.
yeah, and like and I say that just because, and it does tap into a deeper issue, the fact that there's only one unanimous Hall of Famer. um and obviously you don't have to be the best player of all time to earn unanimous recognition, but looking at uh this century, there's 13 position players ahead of him in F4. um he was a very good player, Hall of Fame worthy for sure. And also that doesn't account, the F4 doesn't account for what he did in Japan. So I don't think he should be evaluated fully on his MLB career. Um, but like I'm more on the, I'm more, knocking on the, or, knocking down the doors to get Albert Pujols unanimous. And eventually down the line, whenever he retires, I want Mike Trout to be unanimous. And
That's not gonna happen.
yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Um, but I'm more worried about guys like that. I don't think Ichiro, like, he was a great player, but I think there were better players, or there were players on that ballot who had better MLB careers than Ichiro. In my opinion, like
I mean, yeah.
I think Andrew Jones had a better MLB career than Ichiro did. Uh,
Ichiro had a 9 ERA in his career. What are we talking about? This guy's a unanimous Hall of Famer.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, it does complicate things when you add the his Japanese resume, which is obviously very good. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not too concerned about it. It just illustrates if Ichiro throughout his career traded 200 empty base singles for 200 empty base walks, we would not be talking about this. Or so, like, I'm not necessarily concerned about it. Um but yeah, maybe I don't want to drag down the drag down the mood of the episode, but I think it just needs to be said because everyone was freaking out about it, and I just wasn't on that boat.
There just isn't really a reason to not vote for him. I think if you forced everyone to play Major League Baseball from ages 27 to 45, you're not going to find many careers better than Ichiro's. If you could have adjusted his career to where it was the same length, but he started at age 22, we're probably looking at a much better degree of work. I believe he has the second most hits all time for a player after the age of 26, only trailing Pete Rose. If I'm correct, I believe that's what it is. Uh, but going down ballot, Carlos Beltran received 70.3% of the vote in his third year. He was the second highest riser on the ballot. he will be getting in next year. It's a weak first-year class coming in next year, one of the worst first-year classes that we've seen in a while. And it makes sense considering that these are the players that, had to go out after the pandemic season. I don't know how many people really were willing to do that. I don't think anyone wanted to go out that way. I remember Alex Gordon announcing his retirement before the season ended. So maybe that was more of a pre-planned sort of thing for him specifically. But regardless, I don't think he was ever going to be a Hall of Famer. Cole Hamels is the guy that I will be beating the drum of for the next 10 years starting in 2026. But for now, we will be talking about the Carlos Beltran induction. Andrew Jones got to 66, only a 5% gain for him. I really wanted to see him get into the high 60s on a year where there were a lot of gains to be made. I don't know if I really feel that optimistic about his induction next year. If he needs to gain 9% next year, it's going to be a good year for gains, but he only gained 5% this year in another good year for them. I really wanted to see more out of him. I would say it's about 50-50 if he gets in next year or not. But regardless, I think he's going to get in at some point through BBWAA. He's got 2 more years to do it. Chase Utley got around the 40% mark. He gained 11% from last year after his second year. So eventually Chase Utley will be getting in. He'll probably be like a 5th or 6th year kind of guy. Andy Pettit saw a major rise. He got to 27.9% in his 7th year. I don't think he's going to get in at any point, unfortunately. The steroid stuff is probably going to start plaguing him, but I think first of all, I think sharing a ballot with CC Sabathia kind of forced a lot of writers to look at both of them and say, you know what? I'm voting for CC, but I'm looking at Andy Pettit right now, and looks pretty similar. And the reality is they played for the same team for a lot of years, of course. Pettit with all the postseason success is big. He just didn't have the strikeouts that CC did, and that's kind of the difference maker. But, you can kind of see where that 14% gain came from. It'll probably continue to rise, but I don't think it'll really get to the point of 75 in the next 3 years, which is all he has left. Felix Hernandez got to 20%, a very strong debut for him. It's kind of weird because I think a guy like Felix really emphasizes the importance of the concept of finishing your career, being good enough to stay in the league even if you're not stellar. CC Sabathia had an ERA above 4 in the last 7 seasons of his career, but he was good enough to stay in the league long enough to get to 250 wins, to get to 3,000 career strikeouts. Felix was going to get to 3,000 strikeouts if he had stayed at that level. He made it to 2,500 in just in like 13 years or however long, 14 years, however long he played in the league. But he got to 20%. I think it's a very good debut. I do think he'll get in eventually. I'm very happy to see, obviously he only won 169 games, but if you watched Felix, you understand why that number is as low as it was. It's not because of him. It was because of the teams that he played on. They were awful at getting him run support. And then just finishing up down ballot, Bobby Abreu almost broke 20% for the first time. He was at 19.5%. Dustin Pedroia stayed on the ballot. He got to 11.9%, a pretty decent debut for him. At least, good enough to get a second look and pretty good security to stay on in future years. David Wright stayed on the ballot at 8.1%. Mark Burley hung around at 11.4%. Torrey Hunter is just hanging on for dear life at 5.1%. Got exactly enough votes to stay on the ballot after year 5. Like, I don't know. I almost feel bad at this point. Like, just let him off easy. Like, he's not getting in. It's been 5 years at this point. Like, just open up the ballot for some other people. But hey, that's just my opinion. He was a very good player. We will that closes the book on this year of Hall of Fame discourse. Another fun one. Next year should be an excellent year for returners. We will be celebrating Carlos Beltran. We will hopefully be celebrating Andrew Jones, but we will have to wait and see.
Yeah, right, absolutely. This is a completely random thought, but in kind of after you put Felix Hernandez on your mock ballot last week, I kind of looked more into him and it was like, oh yeah, definitely a great prime, and like there's certainly like a cutoff of like how much longevity you need, things like that, and he was one of the best pitchers of his era, but like it made me realize, like, who I really wish we got more longevity out of, just to see what could happen, is Cliff Lee.
Yep.
Cliff Lee back in like I think he was a first ballot drop, and understandably so. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer.
He debuted on the same ballot, I believe, as Jeter.
Yeah, 2020, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a first ballot drop, but he was like the best pitcher in baseball for a 6-year stretch, which is pretty insane. He averaged over 6 WAR per year, put up a 140 ERA plus and a 2.85 FIP from 2008 to 2013. It's just that yeah, he unfortunately got started at age 29, or like, his prime got started at age 29. Um, and yeah, he retired after his age 35 season. So pretty much his whole career, or his whole, time being good was that point. He didn't really accumulate much, but he had a stretch where he was insane, and it just made me realize, like, man, if only we got like 3 or 4 more years out of Cliff Lee, maybe we would have something to talk about. But unfortunately, yeah, first ballot drop. But but yeah, like that's that's a that's a guy for us. Like, when we talk to like future generations about players, like Cliff Lee's not a Hall of Famer, but we'll be like, man, you don't even know the first thing about Cliff
Yeah.
Lee.
I'll never forget in 2000, I was telling a coworker about this recently, but in 2010, I was like first getting into baseball and I was watching the postseason with my dad. And we were watching the ALCS pretty closely because, we grew up Red Sox fans. We wanted the Yankees to lose. It was Yankees versus Rangers. Cliff Lee had a dominant postseason that year for Texas. And he pitched really well against the Yankees, I believe, twice in that series. They won in 6 games, went to the World Series. And I remember thinking, like, oh man, this Cliff Lee guy, he's the best pitcher ever. Like, the Rangers are gonna win the World Series. And my dad was like, well, actually, I didn't tell you about Tim Lincecum. And then I learned about Tim Lincecum, and I was like, there's a better guy? There's no way. And well, yeah.
Yeah, well, for that period of time,
In 2010, yes.
yeah.
Career-wise, maybe. But yeah,
Um,
that's my Cliff Lee memory.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I can't imagine, like, imagine telling someone after 2009 that Tim Lincecum is going to be not very relevant in baseball history. Like,
Yeah.
he put up he put up 2 consecutive 7-win seasons, of course,
Back-to-back Cy Youngs.
back-to-back Cy Youngs, back-to-back um, back-to-back years where he led the NL in strikeouts and FIP.
Yeah.
Um, and he was only that was
They're
at
two
ages.
no-hitters in a completely different time period.
Yeah, he also won those Cy Youngs at age 24 and 25. Like,
Hmm.
there was probably a reason to believe that he was going to be like an absolute all-timer, but
Yeah.
yeah, just unfortunately,
Like best Giants pitcher since Marichal
yeah.
type stuff.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, that's tough. I think, yeah, I wasn't as locked in. I didn't get locked into like the National League and what was going on until I was more like in middle school, so I didn't really know about the Tim Lincecum lore
Hmm.
necessarily. Um, but yeah, anything more before we wrap up here?
No, I think that's all for this week. Tune in next week where we will be talking about second base.
Yes. Yeah, we will be breaking down second base. Yeah, it's gonna be, I think the right field is gonna be a great list when we get to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty stacked. Because yeah, pretty much it seems like all the good outfielders have eventually moved to right field.
It's weird, yeah.
It's interesting. So yeah, that'll be a fun list to look out for, but that's not next week. That is the week after. And then we get both pitcher lists, 2 in a row. Um, so those are always fun.
Many
Relief
weeks
pitchers,
until we start division previews.
correct. Yes,
Let
indeed.
me check. Okay. So the weekend of the 23rd, we would be doing well, I'll be in Virginia that weekend. We'll be doing season preview.
Mm.
And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so February 8th would be the first division preview, and that is in less than 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so
So
hopefully
we're starting that soon.
hopefully these free agents get signed like all next week so that we don't have 3-hour episodes upcoming.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah,
because,
seriously. Oh my God.
yeah, we have
That's gonna be a lot.
yeah, we got a lot to get into for sure.
Mhm.
Um but yeah, we hope you enjoyed this one. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversations as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. Go check out the playlists, 2025 positional rankings. It's mostly all up on there. And also check out the guest interviews. We've had Mark Simon on 4 times. We've had on Jeff Passan, Chris Rose, Sarah Langs, Mike Petriello, Foolish Bailey, among others. And they're all pretty evergreen interviews. So go make sure to check out the guest interviews playlist on Above Replacement Radio YouTube. Also follow us on social media. Follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. And also follow or yeah, that's it. Um, but yeah, we hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking all the happenings in Major League Baseball once again, and the top 10 second basemen in baseball. We'll see you then.
This conversation is over.
Is over.